Hi, I'm Vail Fucci, your go-to gear gal for all things photography. Today I'm going to be showing you how to get that Peter Hurley look in post-processing that we all love. Now, ideally you'll get the wonderful fall off and everything like that by using his great style of lighting, that great triangle style that you can learn through the Headshot crew. But if you either didn't get it just quite right there, or you want to be able to really kind of accentuate that look, you want to be able to do it in post-processing, these are going to be the steps to make your own actions, to be able to make it super simple to go forth and do it. All right, so let's see how this goes. This is an image that's already gone through post-processing. Now let's go through all the different steps that made it possible to give it that beautiful Peter Hurley glow. So what I do is upon bringing my images into Lightroom, the first thing I do is I go over and I pick out my custom camera profile that I've created with my X-Rite color checker. And you can see how quickly it goes from the awful color that Adobe just automatically renders it to the custom color checker there. If you don't have something like this, you can go and check the different ones, the different presets that they have of the different parts there. Probably portrait may be one of your closer ones there with it, but in this case I prefer having it be that custom profile. If you're using Capture One, I suggest using the profile for your camera that is the Pro Standard one. That tends to work better for headshots. All right, so I've got my custom profile there. Move along. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure that everything white balance wise and everything looks right here in camera. I'm going to say probably around 5607 is about probably where I was happy with it going forth. I find that there's a little bit of green toning in here, so I'm actually going to do spot there. So I'm going to press K for a mask that is going to make a brush, and I'm going to add just a bit of magenta to that tone. Come on down in here, and this may be that it's getting it from this kind of olive tone of the jacket that was giving a bit of that toning in here, giving it that greener tone in the shadow that I don't really want to have there. Okay. Great. So I can see now, I can turn that on and off to being far less green. Okay. All right, from here I can close out my masks. At this point, if I didn't already have things set up from when I was shooting in this, from giving the lovely triangle lighting that is Peter Hurley's kind of signature look there, of getting it so that I already naturally had this nice fall off here, I would make sure that I would probably come in here even and add either in Lightroom or do it in Photoshop, either which way is fine, and add just a little bit of exposure along the T-zone here and make sure I'd possibly brighten up the eyes. I think I got it exposed pretty well, but just to show you the idea of how you do it in Lightroom, again I'm going to press K. I'm going to up my exposure just a scotch, and then I'm just going to brush that little bit of highlight in. Bring that lightness into the eyes, and there you go. Okay, gives a bit more dimensionality to it. And I'm going to probably bring that down a bit just so it doesn't look quite as extreme. Okay. And there, it looks a little hot on her forehead for my liking. And then I want to even up that chin to bring it to almost about the same brightness up there. If I need to, I can open that up just a bit more. Raise this one down more because I don't want it too much. And I can even see exactly what my overlay looks like by checking this button here. You can see with it that I can change my density or flow of my brush here and just bring that little hint of it back up here. All right. Then, okay, again, can add that little bit of dimensionality around the edges here. So we can see it before and after. And it's really subtle. You can see it just that bit right there on her forehead here. Mostly is where you're seeing that effect. If you want, you can add some contour into that nose if you want to make that area more defined. Totally up to you, personal preference, whatever you like. Okay, so you can do this in Photoshop as well, which is what I will show you how to do now. So I will go and take these off of here. So now I'll bring this over into Photoshop. And if you don't have Lightroom, you can even do all those things I just did in Adobe Camera Raw if you brought the raw image into Photoshop, if you took the image in RAW. But otherwise, if it was just in JPEG or anything like that, you'd be able to do all the things I'm just about to do right now here. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I am going to get rid of these lights that are in my shot. I'm just using my polygonal lasso tool here, going around, selecting, and I'm going to go to Edit, Content Aware Fill. Great, looks excellent. Having it make to a duplicate layer, sure. All right, great, that looks good. So I'm actually going to go Layer and Flatten. Some people will go and just as they go along and do everything, they will keep every layer that they're doing. That's totally fine, so you're not doing destructive editing with your stuff. I find, because I've done this so many times at this point, I oftentimes, with the exception of the adjustment layers, and even then you'll probably see me flatten those down and everything like that, end up flattening once I say, okay, I really like this as it is, because I don't like having the massive file sizes of having things that have layer upon layer upon layer when I know that I so very rarely go back and need to edit and change it afterwards. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is bring in that little bit of lightness to the face. Now I've gone ahead and made actions myself here, but I'm going to show you how to make your very own actions to do this, because you'll want to be able to do this over and over and over again. And it makes it just so much faster if you have an action set. So like, for example, I'll show you just literally by me having an action made on this. I can just click on that, go here, and paint in exactly what I want of having my little bits of the lightness into her face. Just so. And that I can back it off, move it here or there with just single click. Now you're going to see all the different steps that we would be doing and how many more steps it would be to get that to set up, which we wouldn't want to have to normally do on a regular basis. So I'm going to drop out that curves layer for right now. So here's how we do it. To make those different things, what we're going to want to do is you're going to go into your actions, and if it's already in button mode, you're going to click on it, take it off of button mode. Then I'm going to go and tell it I want in this case, let's say a new set. And we'll call it Peter Hurley Look. You can call it whatever you want, but that's what I'm calling it. All right, now I'm going to go to New Action. Okay, so I'm going to call it Highlights. I'm going to have it make sure it's going to that Peter Hurley look, and I'm going to pick a color for it so when it's a button that I can easily be able to see and distinguish it from my other ones. So for this case I'll put yellow because sunny yellow highlights, sure. Okay, I'm going to hit record. So now I get the black and white cookie to get the adjustment layer, and so I'm going to click on curves. Okay, then I'm going to click on this little part here and it comes up under properties. And I'm just going to grab a little point here. And now I'm going to choose the value that I want it for. And so for this, for face highlights, I want it to be at 190 for input and 224 for output. So I'm going to go 190 for input and at least 220 for output. Let's double check that one more time. 224 for output. 224. All right. She should look very bright right now. Great. That's what we want. The next is I'm going to go and bring my opacity of this layer down to about 30% because I find that's about a good starting point I find for adding this in. Great. Now I click on the layer, and I'm going to rename it Highlights. I hit Enter. Make sure I'm clicked onto this mask. Come over, click on Paintbrush. Click on my color swatch here. Make sure I'm at F. So we have white, 255, 255, 255. Hit OK. Great. Now I click on again, hit Command-I to invert it, so it is black. Go back and I click on Paintbrush. Great. Then I'm going to hit Stop on my action. So now that is recorded. So you can see, instead of me having to do all those steps, if I delete that, I can just go. I can choose hit button mode so it looks nice, and I scroll on down to where I had my stuff there, and right here, highlights. Boom, it's made it right there already for me. So now we're going to make the actions that are the remaining ones here. So we have our highlights one made up. Now we're going to make our shadows action. Go, take out of button mode, and I'm going to do new action. And this is going to be shadows. And shadows are darker, so I will go with violet. And record. Okay, so just as we did before, come in here, click on that layer, go for my little cookie, curves, get the little point, and I'm going to get the value for you. For shadows, we want it input 61, output 30. 61, oh, that was 62. 61 and 30. So it should look considerably darker. That's exactly what we want. Double click on the name of it. I'm going to make it shadows. Hit return. Come here, change the opacity of my layer back down to, you guessed it, 30% is my happy spot for that to start with. Great. Going to click on this, invert my layer by Command-I, come over to my brush, make sure I'm set here, make sure I'm set to total white, and then I hit stop. I'm going to make another action. Here we go. Only a couple more to go. Stick with me here, people. It'll be worth it in the end, I'm sure. Okay, new action. And this is going to be darken background. Okay. Make this blue. Record. And you guessed, put the little cookie, adjustment thing, click on curves, go get our value for darken background. It's going to be 129.99. 129.99. Okay. Yep. Then we name this to darken background. Return. Make our opacity come down to, on this one, 25%. I'm going to hit and make sure I'm clicked on my actual mask. Command-I to invert it. Come over, press my brush, press my color, make sure F. Great. Hit OK. And stop my action. 2 more to go. One remaining curves one. This is kind of just an overall contrast pop. So I'm going to pop this on by doing, you guessed it, new action. We're going to make it pop. And for that one, pop sounds red. So I'll record that. Get my cookie there. Going to go to curves. And this one is actually going to have multiple curve points for us. So I'll go in and see that the first one for my Make It Pop is 3125. 3125. My next point will be 117, 130. $117, $130, $200 and $213, $200 and $213, and $232, $242, $232, $242. Great. Now, come on over here, call it Make It Pop. Hit return. Click on it. And this one we actually are not going to invert it because we wouldn't be necessarily painting in where we want to make it pop. You can do that if you wanted to afterwards, if you only want to, say, make this bit of the kind of contrasty curve line there applied to just the face, but I generally apply it to everything. So I'll bring this down to 25% as its default to start with. And I hit stop. So now the very last one, a pop of saturation. So I'm going to go to New Action, call More Saturation. And go to Color, and let's say Orange for saturation. Okay, I'm going to record my action here. Thanks for letting me know about the Creative Cloud app, guys. All right, and what I'm going to do is New Action. Oh, I don't want to do that. So I'll click on New Action, and I'll put More Saturation. Color, sure, let's make it orange. And we will record our action. I'm going to go on this for my adjustment layer, but this time instead of curves, we're going to go to Hue Saturation. Our value we want to put for that is +14 on the master channel for saturation, +14. Actually, she's going to look pretty intensely, probably more orange than we would want her to be. That's okay. We want to make sure we bring our opacity way down. That was to saturation 30% of that. So let's bring it down to 30 as that place that will have it so it defaults to start there. 30. Great. And it names it Hue Saturation. We'll just name it Saturation. Click on the layer and invert it by Command I. Great. Now that's totally taken care of. Now I hit stop. So now you have all the tools necessary to be able to do the different bits of highlight and shadow and saturation bits on the face. So the very last step would be if you are going to want to possibly sharpen up the eyes and any other details here. I happen to just generally like to make the eyes pop. So here's how I do this. We're going to make our action for it. Click here, New Action, and I'll call it eyes. You could call it sharpen up, whatever you want. I use it for eyes, basically. And we'll do color green, record. So the first thing I need to do is I want it to be seeing the image the same way with all the different changes I have made. At this point, I know we haven't made different changes, but it doesn't matter. We can still just make this action for it to do this. So what you want to do is we're going to make it create a stamp of the layer of everything that's showing. With that, I tend to do Shift Command Option E. You need to make sure that you're clicking on the topmost layer that you want to include of everything down below it. So Shift Command Option E. You can see, boop, it's made it stamped out there. From here, I will then go and click on Filter, Other, High Pass. Now, you can subtly, just barely see, I'll kind of increase my screen size there. You can just have a hint of seeing the different stuff. You'll see a more magnified view of it in this little window here. So you can see if I have this on much smaller, we barely see it at all. If you bring it up high, super high, things start to look really, really, really weird. You don't want to have too much sharpening going on the eye. I find somewhere between 2 and 3, depending on how many pixels you have in your image and stuff like that, anywhere from 2 to 4 is probably what's going to be useful here. So let's try for us somewhere in the neighborhood of 3. Seems good. Okay. Just want that little hint. All right. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to name my layer. That's going to be eyes. Now comes the magic. I take this and I switch the blending mode of this from normal to overlay. So beforehand, if you see here to there, it's hyper sharpened everything. We don't want that. We only want that effect to be limited so that we're going to bring that focus and attention to different parts. So I'm going to click on that layer, get my mask, hit Command I to invert it, click on my mask, click on my paintbrush, click over here, make sure it's FFF, FFF, OK for white, and then I'm going to hit stop. Now I'm set up that I can go and brush this effect on anywhere I want. So say in this case, to the eyes here, there we go. That little tiny bit there, you can see what a huge difference it does in making that really pop. So now that we've made all these actions, let's go back and do this as if we were editing it from scratch, but now being able to do it with having the actions. So I'm going to delete all those layers. Don't worry, all that hard work you did of creating the actions, I'm going to hit button mode, is now probably selected and put down at the bottom of wherever it last was if you had a set. You can easily take it out of button mode, collapse all these different things that you've just made, and move them anywhere you like into the setup of where you have all your different actions. If it's something you use regularly, you might want to put it right up at the very top. And I'll go back to button mode so I can bring it there. And voila, there are those things that I just made right up there. So say we're back to here, brought in our image. Before doing any of these other different bits, what I would normally do is clean up the image. Here's the way I do that. Now luckily, this lovely young lady that I'm doing the picture of, Jezebel, is an actress. She had just about flawless skin to begin with. So we don't have much to go and edit, but I will still show you the little bits here and there to do. So I focus in, and I am a fan of the patch tool. Go in, just drag it over. And I apologize, before I do that, I always do a duplicate of my layer. I just take it and pull, drag down to here to the little plus sign, and then that makes a duplicate layer. So that anything I want to, it's still back below there for me to work from. so that if I make a boo-boo, it's still there easily for me to go back and find. Okay, going through and first just getting real obvious little parts, that dark little bits possibly of makeup that had fallen down, any little blemishes. Okay. She has absolutely beautiful skin, so there's very little for me to clean up here. Okay, great. So that's the first of just general blemish type of layer there. The next is I'm going to take that layer that I did of that and I'm going to copy that again. And this is how I decrease the amounts of under eye circles, laugh lines and creases, stuff like that. First, it's going to look really, really weird. You can take that patch tool and cover the stuff up entirely. Like I said, it's going to look really weird. You have to trust me, it will look good in a second. You want to pick something in an area close by to it of a similar texture of the skin. Okay, so here's the eyes. We've done that. Now I'm going to drag this opacity down. I'm going to look at my picture here so you can see before to after and bring it till it looks natural. It's going to be completely dependent on the person, how you lit them, etc. If you do it all the way, they don't look like a human being anymore. You need to make sure you back that opacity off so that you still have that brownness of the eyes there. Okay, I like that. Some people would just do another stamp of the layer and move up. I happen just, because I'm happy with it, I flatten my image. I make another copy. Go grab the laugh line. And I'm just getting it till it looks almost smooth here. So it's going to be the same process we just did for the eyes. Doop, doop. And now I drag that down of my opacity again. I'm always doing that back and forth look to see, does it still look right? Does it look real? Does it look good? Okay. That looks good to me. I find this one needs to be bounced out just a little bit more. Bring that down a whole lot so it still blends. There we go. Somewhere over there. Good. Okay. Flatten that. Notice a tiny bit of a tip here. Go there. Good. Great. I also have this bit of the shadow that's on her neck. Let's see if we want to lessen that by chance. We'll see if we like it or not. Go through here. Bring in a similar kind of texture. I know it looks wonky and weird right now, just like before you would expect. Okay. That would look really weird if we just left it that way. That's not what we want. We want to go, still have some of that shadow, but not nearly as hard. There we go. That looks a lot better. And flatten my image. Next, I'll notice real quick here that it looks like we lost a little bit of makeup in here. So I'm just going to even this out. Last but not least, the few little remaining hairs here. Over and over again, I'm always duplicating that layer. In this case, I'm using my little spot healing brush. And in case you're wondering, I'm doing all this using a Wacom tablet. I'm able to get far better precision with that than when I'm using the mouse. So I far prefer it. To each their own. If you don't like wacom tablets or working with a tablet at all, that's totally fine. But for my workflow, I just can't beat it. Okay, still good. Okay. And you don't want to make it too perfect, or else it will not look real. And that comes to the outside of doing hairs like this, of flyaways. You can either use that one that's the spot healing brush tool, or you can choose to use the clone tool, full percentage. I often find it's helpful putting it on lighten. So I'm just going to hit flatten there, make my new layer for doing hair. And I hit Option to mark where I'm going with it. And I'm just going around and cleaning up these edges. Look, yeah, but you'll see I'm not taking it all the way down. But it's okay if I kind of lose it in the process, because I'm doing this on a secondary layer, and I can always come back and put it back in. Now, if you're doing that lighten way, you'll sometimes still get these little wispies back behind it, so you can either go and patch tool and get that texture back, try not to go to the edge there, or as you're going around and doing it, you can keep it on normal. It just depends on your personal preference of it there. Okay. Okay, maybe make the brush a little smaller. I don't want it to look like a fade on there. We don't want it too perfect. Again, look like, as Peter always says, a helmet head. We don't want that. If you had made like a total error and brought this into here, you can always mask off what you did and paint back in from the layer below. Not a problem if you did. You can see just like that. But what I'm going to show you now is how we make the edges look just a bit more convincing. So I'm going to add an empty layer. I'm going to set my brush to a small size, about somewhere in the neighborhood of probably about 3 pixels. I'm going to make sure my brush is not set to the general soft round, but rather soft round pressure size. And make sure that I'm selected in that empty layer. I'm going to zoom in nice and tight on this. And I'm going to use my Option key while I'm on my brush that will allow me to sample different colors. And on this outside edge, I'm just going to make little swiping movements. There we go. That give the hair the look of real hair there, instead of it just coming to an abrupt halt there, which hair doesn't really do. When we try to get rid of those flyaways, it often makes it look like that. Now, depending on the f-stop that you shot with, you may have more blur at your hair at the edge of it than I do here. I shot this with really deep depth of field. Probably 6.3, if I had to guess, was my f-stop here. And so my edges are pretty much just looking like little strips of hair in real life here. But if yours are quite blurry, you may need to be using a Gaussian blur on this layer, and that's why we do it on this separate layer instead of on the actual layer of the picture, why we start on that blank layer. And I'll show you in just a second. So we get through here, get those edges looking realistic. Always sampling, because hair is not just one color. If you make an errant, like whoop, like that, oops, just Command Z. It's not a big deal. Very simple to fix, process. And getting our little realistic wisps of hair in here. And it's a lot of work, but it's worth it in the end because the realism is so much better with that effect. much better cleanup on the flyaways. Okay, so now on that layer, I will go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I'll zoom in so I can see what this is looking like and having an effect on it. I only need just a hint of an effect of blur on it in this case because I don't want it to be like I can barely even see what's there. I need just that little tiny bit of blurring. You can see from before where you're seeing the individual little strands, just that tiny bit of it. Okay, you can see here from before to after how it's just that much more convincing. And then depending on your stuff, you may want to slightly change the opacity on it. So there you go. Far more convincing edges. And now we can use those different tools that I mentioned in the first place of making her have that glow to her face. So I'm going to flatten this and we'll go in here and we're going to use those actions we created. So first I'm just going to click on highlights. And now, because we did all that hard work before, it's going to make it come up to be exactly what we need here, of it being that white color, exactly what we want. Our brush is already set. I can make this bigger, and I can now brush in my highlights. Now right now my brush is set at 100%. It might be a bit high for me. I might want to bring it down so I can kind of layer this effect on as I go along. Depends on what you're comfortable with. So I'm just going to get just a little bit in the center here, come down around the middle. And what I'm really paying attention to is bringing that light in the eyes. Bringing the chin back to just almost the same level of luminosity as was the forehead here. Okay. And I'm doing this with a soft edged brush so that this is making a very simple kind of grade there. I can paint it back in by just switching to pressing X there to my black. I need to bring that back in. And I can press this backslash, and then I can actually see the kind of patterning as to where this is actually going. Red is where it is not on, white is where it is. So right now I want to make that look a bit smoother here of the effect. Hold on, I'll just bring this back in together. That would be really bright, we don't want that. And then bring it back with this softer brush here to kind of bring that effect in. I can see from before to after, giving it just that little pop of those highlights that Peter loves so much. And it makes people just kind of glow. It's really nice. And brought that bit of light up into the eyes. Okay. I may just bring it down just a scotch here so it's not quite as much there. And bring a little more into my chin. And a little down into the center. So that it doesn't look like her face is a totally different color from her body. Okay. Now I'm going to add our shadow layer. Great, I can go and automatically I check it's on white because we had set it to do just that earlier. If we want, we add our little bits of shadow in here. Press to see where it is. Don't really need it up in here too much on her. If you had somebody who was balding and they had a really prominent forehead, sometimes bringing that down and making a little bit more shadow gives them some noggin relief. Okay, so we bring this shadow bit in here. Again, it's adding that bit of dimensionality to the face. If you wanted to bring in some contouring to the nose, you can do that with it here. So we can see before to after, it's just really subtle. And you have the ability to make your opacity higher or lower with this here of it. I find, again, doing this at that 30% about right, but you can kind of tweak it here or there. You can see that difference there, just that little bit. I think I'm going to want probably just a little more shaping in here. Bring that in here, just that little bit. Okay. And it's all about being subtle. You don't want them to look completely insanely brighter than they were. You know, it's just that little bit of difference that you're going to be able to see there. I even say that's probably a bit stronger than I might want. I might take it down a bit. There we go. Great. Okay. If you wanted to then really do it Peter style, you can do it where you're going to darken the background, which now underneath it's totally darkened stuff there. I'm going to hit invert to make the whole thing dark there, but then I'm going to paint back my person. So hit X, and have my opacity at full on so that she's lightened up. And so it's just a hint of that little bit that's drawing you into that face even more. There. Okay, we're going to hit it with a bit of saturation, only in the spots where we did a lot of the lightening. Now, you can actually even copy your exact highlight map if you so desire by holding down Option and dropping that onto here and hit Replace Layer Mask, yes, and it will do it and then copy exactly the same spot. Or you can just paint in where you want your saturation with it there. So you can see it will go in the exact same area. I may just kind of dial it in there, here and there. And the reason being is when you've made those little parts artificially brighter, it is going to take away some of that saturation, and so you'd want to bring some of that life back to the person. That little pop. Okay, so you can see before to after, it's very subtle, but it's there. You can always increase it if you want, but I like it, again, pretty subtle. Okay, and then the very last step is you can choose if you want even more of a pop to click on our Make It Pop action we did. So you can see before to there, after. You can choose again to dial it down, dial it up, whatever it is to taste of what you like. So just that little hint. Yeah, and the great thing is all these things are above it. So if you realized you needed to make a change, like in the case of her lip, say I wanted to make this line go away and have things still apply with everything, that can still be there. I just work with it underneath those adjustment layers. That opacity down, that's the name of the game for softening things up. There we go, I like that a bit better. And then last but certainly not least, click on the topmost layer, and we click on eyes, and you can see if we had it inverted of that, the whole thing would be crazy sharpen. We don't want that. And then we can go and paint in just where we want the effect. And if it seems like that's popping way too much, which I would say it probably is, you can just dial down that effect. Okay? It's really quite amazing how well that works. And also be on the lookout for gray eyes. If the eyes are looking a bit dark, didn't get quite as much light into them, It's always good to do it in camera when you can, but if you realize it afterwards, you can just do another dose of doing the highlights here. So we'll do highlights again, and I can go here and pop that in and just brighten those up just a bit more. There we go. We can see how before, after. But you don't want to make it crazy. That just looks really, really weird. You want to make sure it's just subtle. That's it. That took us from this to this. And once you now have those actions already created, it'll take you just a fraction of the amount of time in the future when you're doing the edit. Now I'm going to show you a real quick and easy fix if at the end, if you went, oh gosh, now that I'm looking at it, the white balance seems a little too warm or a little too cool or something like that, how you can actually adjust your white balance right here on the fly in Photoshop in a way that's probably simpler than you've used before. And it's actually using the Adobe Camera Raw plugin. So I'm going to go my topmost layer, hit Shift, Command, Option E to make a stamp of all visible there. I'm going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And it's going to open it up in Camera Raw. And now we have our very easy sliders that we're used to working with, of being able to go back and forth there. So here's where it was. Say I thought that she was looking maybe just a little too warm. I'm able to bring down my temperature just a scotch there. Say she was looking a little too green, I could bring up the magenta just a little there. And we can see our changes there by just pressing this little eyeball from here to here of seeing those differences, which is really nice to be able to do that at the end of, if you've done all this other work and you're going, oh no, just didn't think it was exactly where I wanted it to be. You can still change things very easily using this simple feature of Adobe Camera Raw with that. So I will end up hitting OK because I like that change there. And now it's just going to make that new layer for me with that change. So you can see from before to after with that. And I can even do the same thing I've done before with that layer of bringing down the opacity to kind of bringing it into taste. And that is how to edit the shot to make it have that wonderful Peter Hurley glow. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions for me, the headshot doctor, Vail Fucci, please feel free to leave your comments down below. And if you found this helpful, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified in the future when I have new content. Thanks so much and have a great day.